Chris Scher, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. And before we get started, I just got a message on my screen saying this meeting is being live streamed. So I have to consent that I've got this. I got to tap on my screen real quick. There we go. Okay, now we can get started. All right, so it's been a fun week for in the sports world. We've had a lot of good stuff, but I think arguably the biggest story of the week, if not maybe one of the biggest stories of the year, is that Raiders defensive end Carl Nassib came out of the closet and did a short video on Instagram and came out and said he was gay. And, like I said, it's something that we thought was going to happen eventually in major pro sports in this country, that a major professional athlete was going to come out. I mean, I remember in the NBA a few years ago, there was a player for the Nets, was his last name Harris, I believe, who came out at the end of his career, didn't play much after that, but he came out. He was the first. Nobody we're aware of in hockey yet, or MLB active players, but Carl Nassib has come out, and I say bravo. I think it took some guts to do it. The NFL has always been looked at as like the manly man of sports, the macho sports, and here's a guy that plays defensive end who rushes the quarterback, plugs up the defensive line to stop the run. And, you can't accuse this guy of not being a manly man, so to speak. So whatever, I think it's great. I think it's good for human rights, especially during Pride Month in this country. And I think it's great to see that other players are accepting of it so far. They'll be curious to see what happens when training camp starts next month. In the locker room where we're not privy what's going to happen, or what could happen, what the reaction is going to be. But I think this guy has proved himself as a solid NFL player over his career. And realistically, I think this will dissipate, and it'll just be a footnote eventually as we move on towards the regular season starting. Robert, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, if this name looks familiar for our friends here in Central New York, it's because this is Ryan Nassib's brother. Ryan Nassib, of course, was the quarterback of those Syracuse football teams back in the early part of the last decade. That was kind of part of the resurgence of that program. So, for Carl Nassib to do this, especially where he is in his career, for one thing, I've seen, some people kind of dismiss this. Oh, he's not a big name player. Certainly it's not like a JJ Watt caliber player, but he's no bum. This guy had, just a couple seasons ago, had 6 sacks with the Buccaneers before he signed a pretty nice deal with the Raiders. So, they wouldn't be paying him that kind of money if he was just some bench warmer or whatever. So this guy's a pretty solid player. And, to do what he did in the NFL is a pretty big thing. And I think it's fair to say in any male pro sports league, this is significant. If you look at the WNBA, there's plenty of out athletes, in the WNBA, women's soccer. Breanna Stewart is a good example. Another Central New Yorker, Central New York native who it's well publicized. I think she just proposed to her girlfriend not too long ago. So, I think that it's high time that this becomes more accepted among male sports. And I think what Carl Nassib did here, certainly, respect his, personal wishes and that kind of thing. I don't think, he's not doing this for, any sort of gain. He just wants his truth out there. And yeah, I hope that there's a time where, people don't have to do this. But I think what Carl Nassib is doing is really laying the foundation for other players to say, look, this is who I am. You have friends in the locker room, all this other stuff. I've heard a lot of different former NFL players talk about this recently, and they say, look, as long as these guys are showing up, playing, and they're doing their part as the team, like it doesn't bother people in the locker room. And I think in the vast majority of cases, that's going to be true. Certainly you're going to have a few idiots out there. There's a few idiots on every team on a lot of different issues. Not to name names. I think we know where that can go. But with Carl Nassib, really an admirable thing to do. He didn't have to do this. It sounds like, people close to him were already aware. I'm sure he told them directly. So he didn't have to make a public announcement of this sort. But for him to do that, again, I think that lays the foundation for other players, especially in the NFL, because we know how that what that kind of environment is like, that other players may be comfortable in the maybe days, weeks, months, years to come to say, this is who I am. I hope you respect it.
Justin, go ahead.
Well, not to downplay anything, but to be honest, through my media consumption over the last couple of days, I don't think this story, this announcement, was on par with a lot of NFL stories we've consumed this summer, and I say that meaning that it's a good thing. That I think several years ago, if an active NFL player would have come out as a homosexual, it would have been all over the quote unquote front pages and headline news and stuff. And I think it's just goes to show our evolving culture in many respects. We're not 100% there yet, but that people are more accepting of other people's sexualities. And I'm not going to say this wasn't a big deal. It absolutely was. Credit to Nassib for I'm sure going to be an inspiration for a lot of his peers, a lot of young men and women out there who are struggling because they're not necessarily ready to make their sexuality public. They're not necessarily comfortable with that, and maybe he can be an inspiration to people like that. That hey, it's okay. Look, I did it. I made an announcement on my Instagram. You can do it too, and you should be comfortable, or you can be comfortable with who you are and be comfortable in your own skin. I'll just say this, talking about whether teammates or NFL locker rooms are going to be comfortable with this. I certainly hope they are. You never know. We're not in the locker rooms, so we're just guessing here. But I think of Vince Lombardi. Now, Vince Lombardi, as everyone knows, was passionate, hard ass of a coach. His priority, no matter what, when it was with the Packers, and then his couple years there before he passed away with Washington, was he only cared about winning. And if you look up a little bit about Vince Lombardi, you'll find out that Lombardi had a gay brother and was kind of a champion for gay athletes. He's when he was with Washington, he had a couple players who were gay. He had front office executives who were gay, and there's this one quote I looked up from a story that ran about 8 years ago regarding a running back named Ray McDonald who played under Lombardi with Washington, and Lombardi made it clear to his other players. I'm going to say the quote here: "If I hear one of you people make reference to his manhood, you'll be out of here before your ass hits the ground." And that's how it should be. All that matters in sports is results. Doesn't matter your sexuality, your background. The NFL is a diverse place where 75% of the league are minority. So just to wrap up, credit to Nassib for doing this. I hope he can serve as an inspiration to other athletes out there who are struggling with their sexuality or aren't feeling comfortable making that public yet. Not saying they necessarily have to, but I think he provided an avenue should people like that want to do so. And hopefully this continues to be normalized, and it doesn't have to be a big story the next time an active athlete or a former athlete or whoever decides to make this announcement.
Yeah. Our next topic, the NBA playoffs. We're down to the Final Four, but one of the teams that's not in the Final Four is a team that everybody thought was going to win the whole thing, and that is the Brooklyn Nets. This was a team of superstars of Durant, Harden, and Irving, and obviously they didn't get it done. They fell in Game 7, and they are out of the playoffs. Very disappointing. And the question is, with these superstar teams, is this a good idea to try to assemble these like super teams, players and things? Well, I look at it this way. I think the Nets had some injuries that definitely had an impact on this team. And that to me is the major reason why they weren't able to advance to the conference finals, much less get to the NBA finals. So I think if the Nets had been healthy, I think things might have ended a little bit different. But, there's nothing wrong with trying to get talent. I mean, talent, especially in the NBA, talent wins championships. I mean, I remember the Michael Jordan Bulls of the late 80s, okay? And this was the dynasty was starting to blossom. And, Michael Jordan, I mean, look, he didn't get to the NBA finals for the first time until 1991. And that's when he had Scottie Pippen and Tony Kukoc and Dennis Rodman. And there were a lot of, good players that had to be with Michael Jordan for him to win those titles. It wasn't just all himself. Because when it was all himself, they didn't even get to the final. So I think that there's nothing wrong with trying to get talent, but obviously the most important thing is health and chemistry. If you have those two things with talent, then you're going to be tough to beat. Justin, go ahead. Talk about the Nets.
Talk about, Chris, you're a real expert interviewer when you're starting a question with talk about. Listen, the superstar, the big threes of the NBA, do the Nets failure to even make the conference finals, is this an indictment against assembling teams like that? Of course not, because every team this decade has been assembled like that won anything. You look at, obviously, the team that kind of started it all, the Heat with LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. That team had a nice run of 4 straight NBA finals and 2 championships in there. Golden State, they obviously added Kevin Durant to an already fantastic core, and they were basically unbeatable for a couple of years. I don't think this trend is going anywhere. I think the Nets probably would have put up a better fight. I mean, they lost in a Game 7. It was a pretty tight series, obviously. But yeah, you mentioned it, Chris. They weren't healthy. Kyrie Irving didn't play later in the series. James Harden was an unknown the entire series, and, he's a bit of a bum this year anyway. This was kind of Kevin Durant and a lot of, guys playing at less than 100%. So now if I'm the NBA, I don't know exactly how you do this, but I would look to incentivize players not moving from team to team. I think the forming of all these super teams and guys switching teams every year, I think it's bad for the league. Kevin Durant, credit to him, I guess, for leaving Golden State and going to Brooklyn to kind of put a stamp on that team. But that guy should have never left Oklahoma City. Like, he was their guy in Oklahoma City. He left to go to Golden State to form a super team. And that's one NBA market that suddenly is a lot less interesting. And this is a trend that's going all over the league. So I'm glad that Milwaukee, which is kind of a team that was built a little more traditionally, they drafted Giannis. A lot of their other guys are not necessarily star players. Like Chris Middleton's a solid guy, but not quite on that A tier of NBA players. They're more of an old school throwback team. Like, we're going to build this from the ground up and develop our own. And I'm glad it worked for them. Hopefully other teams take note. But super teams are probably here to stay for the time being, and I think that's going to hurt the NBA in the long run. When the league was at its best, it was when Magic Johnson was a Laker and only a Laker, or when Larry Bird was a Celtic and only a Celtic, or Michael Jordan was a Bull. You didn't see those guys hopping from team to team. I think we'll look back on some of these current players' legacies, like Durant, like James Harden, and they won't be as beloved because they chose to bounce around and always try to pick the perfect situation.
Robert.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that point, before I get to the Nets specifically, I do think, and I don't know what the NBA can do to address this. I mean, the way that they do contracts and collective bargaining and stuff is kind of been interesting. So I think that it might have to be fixed in that as well. But I don't know how good it is for the league that this generation of NBA players, and you extend that to the fans, that there's very little connection you have to teams. It's more of a connection to the players. If you're a LeBron fan, you're going to be a LeBron fan whether he's playing in Cleveland, Miami, or Los Angeles. If you're a fan of Kevin Durant, you're going to be a fan of Kevin Durant regardless of whether he's playing in Oklahoma City, out in the Bay Area, or now with Brooklyn. So, I think that's obviously it benefits the players that way, but in terms of the competitiveness of the league and the attachment that people have to teams, this is why, to Justin's point, that era of basketball with Magic Johnson as a Laker, with Jordan as a Bull, I get it. He played, he had a few minutes with the Washington Wizards back in the day, but his time was with the Bulls and only with the Bulls. He didn't bounce around from team to team to chase titles like some of these guys today. And so, I don't know what the solution is again, but it's just interesting how the NBA has changed, and I don't think it's for the better either, because even though these super teams might be fun to watch, there's no real attachment to them unless you've been a fan of that team for a while, and then those players come and go. You're not going to change your view, but for the bandwagon fans we know that exist in sports, they might be a Nets fan because Durant's a net, or LeBron's a Laker now, so now they're a Lakers fan. It's all very interesting, and I don't know how the NBA is going to get out of that, especially with how much power these players wield these days. As far as Brooklyn goes, I agree with you, Chris, to an extent that injuries played a role. I think not having Kyrie Irving was certainly a blow down the stretch there. But look, Brooklyn still had a pretty good team there. James Harden, Kevin Durant, they have some pretty good role players on that team. They blew a 2-0 lead to the Bucks. They went up 3-2 in that series as well. They blew both of those leads. And so, I think that this also showed some of the flaws with super teams, that while you might have some of the most talented players in the league, that doesn't mean you're going to have the most talented team in the league. And I think that's one of the mistakes made with the analysis with Brooklyn, is that everybody just assumed that this was going to work, that they were going to overpower everybody else. And as we know, to quote Chris Berman, this is why you play the games. And I think Harden and Durant, obviously, they have a relationship going back to Oklahoma City. I don't think that was so much of an issue, but you're coming in. This is with Kyrie Irving. I don't know if that they gelled necessarily. We'll see if what year two brings with this group of players. If they remain intact, who knows what the offseason will bring. But I think it was a disappointing year for them. A lot of people thought that they were going to win the title, just like super teams of the past, and they didn't deliver.
Yeah, it's too bad. Like I said, it would be kind of fun to see the Nets get to the finals. A team that I believe has never won an NBA championship. So, all right, our last topic, college football. This came out last week, but it's still pretty fresh. But the college football playoff is in the process of looking at, and most likely this is going to happen, expanding the 12 teams from 4. And all I can say is I have been advocating for an expanded college football playoff for decades. I think the first time I might have ever written this was back before Justin was even born, to be honest with you. And Robert was probably in diapers, late 80s at my college newspaper, UAlbany. So I'm all in favor of this. I think you can never if you look at the NCAA college basketball tournament, March Madness, I mean, look, there's 68 teams there, and there's the play-in games, and, we have March Madness. And the thing is, there's just so many teams involved. It's so much fun to watch the tournament progress and see a Cinderella story, or see a favorite get upset. We love, that's what makes March Madness so great. So it's going to be nice to see college football in a smaller way do something like this. My only qualm, I guess, is they're going to go with 12 teams. Now, supposedly, and I know none of this is finalized yet, but there's going to be 5 automatic bids for the major 5 power conference champions. Okay, good. And then I guess there's going to be some spots for some of the other conferences that have champions that are not part of the Power 5. Good. And then you're going to have a few teams that, maybe they didn't win their conference championship, but they were right up there, and pretty good team and everything, and they're worthy of being in. And that's good too. My thing is, you're going with 12 teams. Now, I wasn't a great math student back in the day at Auburn High School, but when you've got 12, that means you're going to have 4 teams getting buys. Okay. And if you're going with the Power 5 getting those first 5 spots, that means that one of those 5 teams is not going to get a bye. It's going to have to play an extra game. So someone's going to be upset about this. I've always said 16 is the right number. I mean, we have a top 25. 16 to me is the right number, because you could argue that, those top 16 that, maybe 14, 15, and 16 don't have a great chance of winning a national title, but you figure they could pull off an upset of number 1, 2, or 3 possibly. So I would say if they're going to do 12, they should just go to 16 and just really open it up wide, make it like a true NCAA, like a basketball tournament, and go all out. So, Robert, your thoughts on the college football playoff possibly expanding?
Yeah, I do like this proposal. We've talked about over the years. We've talked about this subject in kind of different ways, and what we would like to see out of the playoff. I thought 4 was a good start, but I never thought it would be the end of where they should go with this. I think 12 is a decent compromise. You don't want to water it down too much, because as we know, when you look at college football, there's some teams that once you get out of the top 10, that, they might be good for, one of the minor bowl games and stuff, but might not necessarily make good competition for a playoff like this. So I like this idea of, opening it up not only to conference champions, but also some of the highest ranked teams that didn't win their conference championship. It's, kind of the at-large bid, if you will, of the college football playoff. So I like this idea. I think 12, I don't mind the idea of, 4 teams getting buys, first round buys or whatever. I think that makes total sense, especially, you say these are the top 4 teams and they get buys. Are there going to be teams that are upset if they're not ranked, a certain way? Sure, but that's the way it's been with college football for forever. So as long as they have a system like this, there's always going to be people upset. So I don't mind that too much. I'm going to be things with college football, because certainly there's going to be some scheduling tweaks necessary, because these guys are going to be playing more games potentially. And, then with how this plays out, more potential for upsets. You've got, 12, teams involved. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think it could be fun to watch. It certainly already has my interest up there. I hope that they follow through on this and make it happen. But all in all, I think it's a solid proposal. I hope it's implemented. It seems like it has a lot of support among the powers that be that would call the shots on this. So, hopefully they decide to expand it. and go from there.
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, they would be stupid not to expand it. More money, more advertising, more commercials, more game. More is better if you're looking for financial gain. I think people are going to watch the games regardless of who's playing, as long as it has that college football tag attached to it. Now, is this a good idea in terms of competitiveness? That's where I'm a little more skeptical. You're talking about expanding it to 12 teams per year. I look at the last 9 college football playoff games. So we're talking the championship and the semifinals for the last 3 years. You know how many of those 9 games finished with a 1-score differential? 1 game, 1 out of 9 was a close game. And it was the 2020 semifinal between Ohio State and Clemson. Clemson won 29-23, and then went and got stomped by Joe Burrow's LSU team in the championship. So I think you're just opening the door for more lopsided scores, especially with 12 teams when you're bringing in conference champions from non-Power 5 conferences. You get some of the scores between some of the supposed best teams in college football now, the top 4. And, that same year, like LSU, they won their semifinal game against Oklahoma 63-28, a 24 or 25 point game. That's not competitive. That's not close. So what's a number 1 team going to do against some bum from the MAC conference or whoever, So I'm not a big college football fan. So they're going to have to do a lot more than just expand the playoffs to get me to tune in. I need to see competitive, compelling football games, and that is not the product that's been delivered the last few years. So 12, too many teams, in my opinion. If you do 8, I think that strikes a nice balance between allowing some of these maybe non-traditional schools like the non-Alabamas or Clemsons to get in, maybe provide an opportunity for a non-Power 5 school to get in, or a team that isn't a Power 5 but didn't win their conference. It does open the door a little bit for teams like that, but you're not expanding it to such an extent where the competitive difference between the top teams and the bottom teams in this playoff are, 30 points at the end of the day. No one wants to watch that. That's not fun. That's not good for college football.
Yeah, I think what they're gonna do is they are gonna go to 12, and I think they're probably gonna play it 2 or 3 years like that and see how things go. And they can always tinker with it and cut it back to 10 or 8 maybe and do it that way. It's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out. We need an expanded college football playoff. I mean, you look at a school like Gonzaga and the men's tournament that every year they're in the conversation for possibly winning the national title or making a run to the Final Four. I mean, we had Loyola Chicago a few years ago making it to the Final Four, and that was a great story. And college football obviously is a different sport, but still, I mean, we like to see the underdog or the Cinderella team get hot at the right time and get in there and show what they're capable of doing. So it'll be fun to see what happens, whether they actually do go through with 12 teams or whether they change it. Maybe they just do 10 or 8 and see how it goes moving forward. So,
well, Chris,
right,
I would argue this, you said it, college basketball, college football are 2 different sports, but the regularity of upsets happening in college basketball is far more than what they happen in college football. 99 times out of 100 in college football, the higher ranked team is going to beat the lower ranked team.
You're right.
And then I would say this, and this is not just college football. This is just college sports, especially for the big sports where you have a legitimate chance to move on and play professionally. So football, basketball are the 2 big ones. But how often do you see the star players decide, at some point before bowl season, you know what? I don't want to finish out this year. It's more important to me for my career that I sit out and I train for the NFL draft and the scouting combine and all that, because I want to set myself up for success at the next level. That is happening more and more each year, and you are opening the door for more of these teams that lose star players for that to be in the national spotlight. So
Yeah,
I think
but
that's
Justin,
another thing you got to worry
well,
about.
I don't think you're gonna have to worry about it because there's a difference between a meaningless bowl game like the Weed Whacker Bowl and the college football championship game. I think if anything, the top players are going to want to play because they're going to be on center stage. They're going to be nationally broadcast. They're going to have all the scouts there. Okay. I mean, you have a great performance and a national championship atmosphere, and it's only going to do nothing but shoot up your draft prospects because it shows scouts that, like, when the money's on the line, you're a performer. And I think if anything, you'll see the stars stick it out and play in the playoffs. I don't think we've had many guys from Alabama or Clemson or any of the other teams that have been in the college football playoff the last few years back out. Maybe there's been one or two. I don't remember off the top of my head, but basically all of these guys are playing in these college football playoff games. It's the minor bowl games that don't mean anything anymore, that realistically where guys are saying, no, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to risk injury and screwed up my draft position or anything like that. So I think college football playoff will just help that, though.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of it, how much is the college football playoff worth to college football players? Because, still, and certainly there might be some more movement on this front, but
You're going.
they're not getting reimbursed for their services.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, that's what they're aiming for, to make it into the NFL and to, actually get paid for what they're doing. I also, present another exhibit in this argument, which is Devontae Smith, who lit it up in the college football playoff championship game and fell out of the top 10 in the draft. So, I think that, I think that this notion that it can help players, maybe it can, I'm not going to dispute that, but I think that the scouts and the NFL front office types, they know who the cream of the crop are. And, the one game in the college football playoff isn't necessarily going to change that for them. I mean, look at a guy like Justin Fields, who had, pretty good performances, in those two games this past year. And, he became a kind of pushed to the side, in terms of quarterback prospects. So, I think ultimately with the college football playoff, yes, in some cases, I think for some players that aren't up at that level, maybe some of the, interior linemen, that kind of thing, maybe they can raise their stock a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you're an NFL prospect, playing in these games isn't going to matter that much. And so, that's a whole nother issue to tackle. But, it's going to take a lot more for these guys to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to put my future at risk to play for a game that only my college or university is going to profit off of.
Well, and I think you do have to factor in, like, if you're an Alabama guy, you're thinking like, well, I only have to play 2 games and the second game is for a national championship. Yeah, I'm the chance of injuring myself in 2 games is a lot different than 4. Now potentially you're playing 4 games for it's 2 extra games. That's you're gonna tack on your body. You can't say it doesn't matter when we spent all of this last year complaining about the NFL adding 1 more game and the toll that's going to take on the body. So ultimately, we don't know until this gets pushed through, but I don't think this is a trend that's going away. Like I said, it's not something that's specifically to college football. This happens in college basketball all the time where guys are like, I'm kind of good. I got my half season in college basketball. Now I'm going to prepare for the draft. I would not be surprised at all if you see that trend continue to creep into college football.
We'll see. All right, guys. Very good conversation there at the end. I think best topic was the last one. So, folks, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And we will see you next week.